Hello and good morning to everyone. Welcome to this webinar that we have today. It's good to see so many of you online and looking forward to this session. So as I said, good morning. My name is Natasha Cannon. I am the Managing Director for In-House Recruitment. We are one of the fastest growing communities for in-house recruitment, TA and HR professionals like you guys online with us today. Today's webinar is advertising today's job seekers, getting started with recruitment marketing, which is a hugely popular topic, as I'm sure you're all gathering as soon as you're joining us today. As you may be able to see, we have Glenn online. He's going to be talking us through some key points that they're seeing over at Nthuse. So we are looking forward to that one. As you may have gathered, today's webinar is in partnership with Nthuse, and they're helping to turn clicks into candidates. So they have got an easy-to-build job advertising that's engaging, inspiring, and inclusive. And they do that through a couple of ways. And one is through clear language, and another one is their easy-to-use on-brand content that can be designed and distributed easily by you guys in-house as well. And so I gather that you guys aren't here to listen to me do introductions, so I will pass over to Glenn very shortly. Do please note that on the right-hand side of your screen, you have got the option to ask some questions throughout. So down and perhaps asking at the end, please feel free to pop those questions on throughout the presentation. We will be recording the session, so we'll be sharing that with you post-event as well. But we do encourage a few questions that we can ask Glenn at the end. So that is it from me. I hope you enjoy this session. I'll come back to a Q&A at the end. So I'll pass over to you, Glenn, and looking forward to seeing your slides.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying thanks for spending your time and coming to listen to our webinar today. It'll just take me a second to get my slides up and then we'll start. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about recruitment marketing. It's quite a few different subjects we're going to talk through, but I'd just like to start by giving you a little bit of background about who we are and who our parent company is. Nthuse is part of Magex. You may have heard of Magex before. We provide job boards for a number of clients. In actual fact, well over a few hundred job boards. We design, build, and then maintain and host those boards for our customers. This allows us to collect a lot of data. Literally tens of millions of job ads go through our platform every year. We collect billions of data points off them. And I suppose the most important thing for me to say about all of this is that allows us to analyze the content that goes through the system and work out what's performant and what isn't. Like yourselves, we've seen quite a few different trends in the last few years. And I'd just like to start by going through a few of them because they're really pertinent to what we're talking about today. The first one, which I think most people are really aware of, is that how important employer brands have become to job seekers. This was a survey done where 94% of job seekers said they consider employer brand in one way or another when job seeking. We also do, as well as the data we collect, we also do a lot of research ourselves, and we do like a job seeker survey once a year, a few thousand job seekers. We ask them lots of questions, and the next two results are from that. 57% of candidates locate jobs on job boards and then apply on the career site. This sort of speaks to the fact that although they're looking for roles, they also really want to understand what are the values of the companies and what you're offering. So it's about the wider proposition as well as the role. So they're searching in multiple places. And the last one is this one, which is really interesting, which is 40% of job ads. 40% of people who are looking at job ads on boards are actually using them as a methodology of researching, as well as finding the specific roles. They're trying to understand what companies are predominant in any one area or sector, but also they try to understand what's the career structure, so what a career path would be. So if I'm a designer, would my next step be to become a creative director, or would it be to be a digital product designer? So they understand the whole sort of concept of what the career paths are within an industry. So there's a lot of research that's involved as well as just looking at the roles themselves. I think everybody understands that these days the actual candidate journey has multiple touch points. So they might start on job boards. Typically, we're seeing between sort of 4 or 5 different job boards of what people are searching on when they're really actively searching. But they also includes things like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and obviously the corporate career site itself, but things like your social media and anything about the individuals that they might be working with in the team. So people do a considerable amount of research. There's quite a lot of different numbers have been put on this. We found roughly about 12 is around where people are looking, different ones, but I've heard much higher numbers than that in more recent research. So today we're going to be talking about concepts of marketing in relation to content and advertising. I think there's two things that we really need to understand at the beginning in terms of how we perceive things from a marketing perspective, how to break things up basically. So I'm going to talk a little bit about reach and what reach is, and then we're going to talk about content and then how those two things work together. So when we're talking about reach in marketing terms, we're usually talking about how we can reach a specific segment of a market, how we can use something like email campaigns, or we can use advertising like pay-per-click advertising or things like that to target a specific audience that we might be interested in. And if we take that and then apply that to our industry, we have exactly the same thing. So here you can see a list of the different types of techniques and ways you can reach an audience, like job boards and aggregators. You can use PPC and programmatic, organic and paid for search. These days, paid for search on social is more effective than the organic, but still there. You can reuse material that's in your ATS or talent pools that you might have built. And if you've got the types of software and tech that's available to you, you can do things like recruitment marketing, where you re-nurture groups of people that you already might have in your data. So there are lots of different ways that we in the recruitment area can look at reaching out to specific segments of audience and providing content to them. So that's the reach element of it. How does that then affect content? Because if we break things down and consider it both as reach and content as two separate elements rather than it all being one sort of globurous mass, how does reach affect how we consider content? So I've taken this, which is a image of a landing page, or sometimes they're called lead generation page, from a typical marketing campaign. This one's from Spotify, but I could have picked one from many other ones, any sort of consumer marketing campaign or B2B marketing campaign. And I just want to talk about what's special about this and why they've built this page. So if we look at this page, it really takes some core marketing messages, not everything that Spotify says about themselves, but a core specific message. It's probably aimed at a segment of their audience. And they've tailored that message to that segment to make sure that when they drive audience, use reach to get to the audience and drive it to one point, that it will convert well. Also, one point of conversion in here. So you can see that literally it's asking people to put in an email and sign up to try out Spotify. And lastly, they've removed all other things from the page. Any navigation, anything else that would detract from the messaging and the calls to action that are on there. Why? I think one of the most interesting questions is, why do people who have perfectly good marketing sites, their corporate sites, which they spent a great deal of money on, produce individual pages where they push audiences to create the best conversion? And it's basically around that. It is about conversion. It's about how do you get clarity in that conversion. So if we take reach, and so here on the left hand side we've got a number of different channels. They could be whichever ones you wanted to use, but here we've got Facebook, Twitter, and maybe an email campaign, and the little A at the bottom is for AdWords. So if we took that type of idea of like how you create reach and add it to something that's about providing the best conversion, and you bring the two together, hopefully what you'll end up with is an informed, qualified, and engaged audience. There is a reason to consider things in this way by breaking it down into the two parts, because in the end, this is what you actually want: this informed, qualified, and engaged audience. So I'd like to step back a little bit now and talk about, okay, that's how things work in marketing a little bit. How does that apply to what we do in recruitment and the area that we work in, and look at the tools and ecosystems that we have. And I've just pulled up a job advertisement here on one of the leading job boards. You probably guessed which one. And I'd really like to point out how bad this ad is. This is not unusual, actually. This wall of text that we can see on the right-hand side, this is basically because an ATS system or some sort of multi-poster is being badly configured, and in some way has collapsed all of the text down, so you can see the bullet points have all collapsed and stuff, and just produced a wall of text. How different this is to what we've just looked at in terms of providing message and the quality of communicating over that message. Even when we move to something like one of the modern ATS systems, and we've got like, this is an advert of one of those. This is actually for one of our adverts. You can see that it's actually laid everything out in a much better way. It's much neater, and it's pulled some of the messaging to the front a little bit. But I'd actually say to you that this is also a bit of a facade, because what it does is it talks a little bit about the role, but actually doesn't really talk about the true sort of EVP, which we'll come on to in a little bit, and the true sort of underlying messages about why it would be good to work at a company, and the things that the job seeker would be researching, that wider thing that they're trying to find out about. And then finally, one of the things that that's becoming more common, obviously, is all of the content these days is shared one way or another on different social network platforms, and more commonly now internally as well on things like Slack. So here you're looking at a picture of Slack. It could be Microsoft's Team or one of the other sort of messaging systems that are used internally in companies, or, as I said, as one of the social networks. But look at what's actually happened. When you shared this link here, this is from one of the ATSs, it's actually doubled up the title. It hasn't given you a further description. And the image, although they have put an image in there, it's actually more about the brand of the ATS than it is about the company that's advertising the job. So we'd just like to keep that in mind. And we've talked a little bit about what the job seekers are looking for, but I think it's fair to say as recruiters, we're also looking, we understand the importance of employer brand and our messaging. And when we ask recruiters what the most important thing is to improve the quality of hire, they say communicating the value proposition is the topmost thing. So I think at this point, if I just step back and appraise what we've just talked about, on one hand, we have the job seekers who really want to understand what it's like to work at a place. They really do want to find out what the team's like, what the values of the company are that they're going to work for, as well as the role. As recruiters, we've just seen here that you guys really want to also put that across to them. You want to give them that information. We looked at how things are done in marketing in general, and we can see that actually there's a really good way by breaking up reach and also content and working that content in a way that it converts well and puts a message across well. But in our own ecosystem, it's quite broken. The last three examples I just showed you were not that good and not a really good way of putting across those messages. So if that's not working for us, how do we make it work? Well, we believe there's sort of three major pillars to providing good advertising and good marketing content for recruitment. The first one is the employer value proposition, and we'll talk about that in a second. That's really important to get your unique message across. One that's not really talked about a great deal is visual hierarchy. This is all about putting those messages into hierarchy, making sure that you get the right message to the right group of people and in the right order, so that you get the most value out of your communication. And then finally, language and style. So how do you write things and produce copy that really resonates with people and is inclusive and gets you the most diverse audience? And I'm going to go through each of these three pillars and hopefully explain a little bit about how they all work and ways that you can improve them. So let's start with employer value proposition. So I think the most interesting thing when we start talking about this is specifically in relation to job advertising. There's a balance to be had between the sort of unique value proposition that you want to put forward, or the employer brand proposition you want to put forward, and the benefits package. And that balance changes. This is basically the balance between, are you advertising a role, or are you advertising your company as a place to work? And sometimes, depending on the type of content that you're producing, you'll see a slight change between the balance between these two things. But really important to start with all of this is if you're going to look at your value proposition and your brand, you need to make it evidenced and research based. So there's a maxim in branding that it's not what you say about yourself, it's what other people say about you, which is really important to keep in mind. So you need to go out and, rather than ask yourself what it is that's good about working at your place and what messages you can build around that, you need to ask your current employees or people who you want to be your employees in the local area, and try and work out what messages resonate with them. Then pick the messages that make you unique and stand out from the other organizations around you, and enhance and replay those messages back to your audience. In visual hierarchy, as I said earlier, is something that's not really talked about a great deal, although a lot of people talk about the value proposition. This is an area which is less delved into, and hopefully I'm going to go through this a little bit and help you understand a bit more about it. I'll just give you a little second here to read this. I'm hoping you'll read it the way that I read it on the screen. This is just to show that design can be used to bring forward a specific message. I've sort of used high contrast here in the middle so that you read the first message first, the big one, and then obviously you've read the other two, and finally the one at the top. What you should have done is to read from left downwards, which is a normal way Westerners read text, but I've managed to change the message hierarchy by a bit of design. But if we're really going to talk about how we control how people read on the web or view the web, we need to talk about scanning. I mean, it's a topic that people have talked about web content for quite a while, but I really want to delve into exactly how scanning works and how people read on the web. What you're actually looking at here is a glaze plot. It's how people will read a document. It's built by using eye tracking technology. So a camera tracks people's eye, and the little dots are dwell points, so how long someone has fixated on a specific point, and then the lines between them is how they've moved between them. This type of research has really been encapsulated by a group called Nelson Norman. They're a UX group and probably the most cited in this area, and they've picked out a number of different patterns that you can find using eye tracking technology to work out how people read web content. And there are three that really are of interest to us. There's more than that, but three that we'll talk about today. The first one is the F pattern. So the F pattern it's really reasonably simple to understand. Basically, someone will start at the top of the text, and they will scan from left to right, and then they will move down the side, the left-hand side. And what usually happens is it cuts a pattern that looks like an F. So hopefully you can see that on this one, there's a slight line running down the left-hand side and two strong lines running across the tops of the paragraphs. We're looking a little bit at some heat maps in a little bit. We'll show this a little bit more strongly. This is one of the most common ways that people scan a page. The other two are quite simple to understand as well. The layer cake pattern is pretty much, if you have subtitles within a document, people jump from one subtitle to another, reading just that subtitle, so that each one creates a little layer that they read. And the spotted pattern is where we have a really dense piece of text, like the ones that we're just looking at. And rather than try and read it, an individual looks for anything that's different within that text. So that could be a telephone number, because it stands out because it's all numbers rather than alphabetical, or it could be bold or italic text, or anything that's slightly different from the rest of the text. And they will jump from one spot to another and just read a few words either side of that piece of text that they've pulled out. So those are the three sort of common patterns that we find when people are scanning a material on the web. out of them, the F pattern is considered to be really bad. That's because it's the one where people actually read at least and also take it in the least. The other two patterns can actually be used to our advantage to some extent, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So if we're going to talk about scan reading and designing your text so that it can actually work really well with people who are scan reading, there are 3 or 4 things that we need to go through: highlighting, subheadings, bullets, white space, writing in as pyramid, and single point paragraphs. The first 4 are relatively easy, and we'll quickly go through those, and the second 2, the 2 at the end are a little bit longer, and I can go through those as well. Highlighting. So basically, if you bold individual pieces of text, as you can see in this example, this is from a Bupa dentist ad. So like associate dentist, well-established surgery, Peterborough. What you'll end up doing is forcing people into that spotted scanning mechanism that I just talked about. It will allow people to quickly run through the text, and it will pull their eye each time to the points where you've highlighted things. So bolding pieces of text is a really good way of stopping someone from moving into F pattern scanning. As is subheadings. There's not really subheadings within this, except for down the bottom where you can see the practice. Using those really also stops people from jumping into F pattern scanning. It will force them back to just looking at the text more carefully. The use of bullets is a really good way to break up people's scanning. And we'll go into more detail in the next 2 slides about how bullets work and how to make them work well for you. Also, allowing the text to have a degree of white space, so between the paragraphs and also elsewhere in the text, it's a really good idea to increase the white space. This allows people to break the text down into smaller elements and to consider each element individually. Writing as a pyramid, I best remember this technique by thinking about newspapers, how newspapers write articles. So if you were to hear a news piece, it might start with something like a man died in head-on collision, and that's the first title part of it. And then the next part of it takes the same thing and gives you the same story, but expands it greater. So it might say, last night in Sutton on the A58, a man died on a headlong collision with a lorry. So you can see that it's exactly the same information, but it's slightly expanded. So writing in a pyramid is to give someone exactly what they need up front, but each piece going down the page expands and gives them greater and greater detail. And lastly, it's quite obvious what this means. Single point paragraphs. Try and keep each paragraph to just talking about one particular point or issue that you want to get across, rather than joining issues together or points together within a paragraph. So at this point, I just want to talk about bullets a little bit more, because they're really interesting and how they operate is really interesting. But to do so, we need to have a little bit of a chat about the psychology of perception. Don't worry, it's not as heavy duty as it first sounds. So the particular group of laws we're looking at, Gustav's laws of grouping, have one law called the law of proximity. So hopefully when you're looking at this screen at the moment, you will see 2 groups. On the left-hand side, you see a group of dots, and on the right-hand side, another group of dots. The reason why you perceive them as groups is because each of the objects is of a similar size and the spacing between them is similar. And that's the most important thing that you're actually perceiving. And I can demonstrate that by saying that the one on the left-hand side has a series of dots that are slightly darker red. And although you understand they're darker red and they're sort of maybe a subset, you still perceive the group more strongly than you do the difference. And again, I've played the same trick on the right-hand side, where you can see I've got a triangle, and that triangle is roughly the same size as the dots and roughly the same distance between the dots. So although you understand it as a different shape, the fact that the difference between the similarity between spacing and the size of the objects is actually making you consider it a group. And finally, you can see that I've, on the right-hand side, split the group into sort of 2 smaller groups by increasing the space in between them. Hopefully those little tricks there in the visuals have persuaded you that actually grouping, and specifically grouping in this sense, is all about how similar the size of an object is, and for us, most importantly, how similar the spacing is between objects. So now we can take that and look at bullet points and how bullet points actually work within a piece of text. So if we look again at this piece of text from Bupa, it's really well done. What they've done at the top there, you can see there's three bullet lines. Each of the dots there is equally spaced. As humans, we really love patterns, and we look for patterns all of the time. So it's not just that we understand things by them, as I just explained by the Gustav's law of proximity. We really appreciate them. So here you can see and understand that this is a group, and you understand it's a group because the spacing is equal each time. Unfortunately, we can't always keep the spacing the same, and you can see in the second list here that some of the lines have wrapped. As soon as lines of text start to wrap in bullet points, people start to fall away from reading each individual line and move back to F-point scanning. Nelson's group found that actually people read 70% of bulleted text, which is really high compared to the rest of the text in a document, but only if you can keep everything onto a single line, nice and concise, and have a limited number of points to your bullet list. If, though, you can't do that, then the person who's created this text has understood, right, okay, I can't do that, so I'll fall back onto one of the other patterns, which again is the spotted pattern, and they bolded individual pieces of text to try and stop people falling into that F-pattern scanning. So when we were in-house Recruiter Live, we did a bit of guerrilla testing with some eye scanning technology. We set it up on the stand that we had, and we created 2 ads, exactly the same job title, exactly the same text, but one we laid out quite plainly, like the one you can see here. And we asked a number of people who were at the event to try looking at this and just to read the ad while we scanned their eye patterns to see what was going on. And you can see here a combination of all of those people's view of this particular ad. And hopefully you can see the F pattern here, where it's strong across the top and strong going down the left-hand side, but actually not a great deal of the text on the right-hand side is being read. We then reconstructed the same ad, as I said, with the same text. We didn't change any of the text, but what we added to it was rich media and some content related to the EVP. So this was an Nthuse design ad. It's actually broken into 2 halves. On the left-hand side, you can see the top of the ad, and on the right-hand side to the bottom. Unfortunately, we couldn't really fit it on the screen without breaking it all up. But the important thing here is to look how intense the heat map is, that we've actually got reds this time, which means that a lot more people are concentrating, fixating on it. But really importantly, if you look at the body of the text there, you can see strongly the F pattern again. But this time, you can see that they've read all the way across. It goes yellow to green right across the text. And more importantly, that they've engaged fully with the rest of the document all the way down to the bottom. We can see good sort of fixation points where people have read on all of the content. And one probably to pick out at the top here is on the top right-hand side, you can see an area where we've used a color background to enhance some of the text and draw people to a specific message that we wanted to put across. And again, I just bring up back the one before so you can sort of compare the 2 again. And this is all really important about how you design your content from a visual hierarchy perspective, because typically you only have 8 seconds to make an impression. Microsoft did some research at the beginning of, I think it was 2012, where this was 4 seconds more than this. This number is actually going down over the years, but you have a very limited time to make this impression. People scan documents very quickly. Okay, so we've covered visual hierarchy. We're going to move on to language. Textio did some research on spelling and grammar. I thought this was quite an interesting piece. They looked at the conversion rates in relation to documents that had spelling and grammar errors in them, and found that it didn't actually make a great deal of difference. There was a slight difference, but statistically, actually, the conversion rates didn't change for ads that had a small number of spelling mistakes or grammar ads in them. That doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that you should ignore grammar ads and spelling mistakes. I think from a professional point of view, it is damaging to your brand. But actually, in terms of conversion, didn't seem to impact that much, which we thought was quite interesting. Having said that, there are things that are really impactful to your conversion, and that's around readability. So having too much business jargon in a document really does affect it. passive voice affects it. That doesn't mean all passive voice is wrong, but what it tends to do is make things wordy and indirect and impersonal. And because of that, that really changes how the application rates work. And finally, sentence length and general readability also affect how many people will apply for a job. This was a piece of research work done for the government. It's a little bit dated. It was done a while back, but it was done after the government had spent 10 years trying to improve the reading age of the working population in the UK. And it was an assessment of the impact of that. And at the time, they found 16 million adults, nearly half the working population, had reading ages at around primary school level. There's been more recent research done in this area by an international body which looked at many sort of Western countries, tried to work out what the adult population reading age is. In actual fact, across the general population, it is still as bad or as worse as it was then, which really leads us to a point of saying that most of the ads that we see at the moment, I did a piece of research across 10,000 ads recently and found that typically the reading age is around 17.5 for UK job advertising. So you can imagine how many people have problems actually reading a lot of the job ads that are out there, because a lot of them are a lot higher than that as well. 64% of job seekers won't apply for a job if they don't understand the job title. So this is again about language, and it goes right back to that first point I said at the beginning of the presentation, where job seekers research and try to understand the language that's used around a specific career path. So they'll look and try and understand what are the likely job titles that relate to me. If for any reason you use internal language or language that's unusual, you will find that you'll really turn off your job seekers. They won't apply. They just basically won't click on the ads if the titles don't resonate with them and they're not understanding the context of their career path. Appcast in America has done some really interesting research over the last 2 years on the length of job titles and how they affect advertising. They basically broke down the job titles into 3 different groups: 1 to 3 words, 4 to 6 words, and 7 to 9 words, so 3 words each, and found that the 1 to 3 word group has a 36% increase in applications. So the smaller you can make your job and more concise you can make your job titles, the better. Also, they looked at what they call symbols. So a symbol is where you add additional information. So that might be like, I don't know, location information like Brighton, UK, or it might be something like bracketed part-time or other bits of information into the job title, which not actually the job itself, but meta information related to the job. Those also bring down application rates. So unless it's absolutely necessary for people to understand the role, I would take those out as well. And finally, brand voice. So we've talked about some of the things that don't particularly work well and how to maybe correct them, but let's talk about some of the things that you should be including. So if you've got a really strong EVP, like a specific set of messages that you want to do, try and make sure that you add them in a way like that's being done on this screen here. So this is again from Bupa Dentist Group. They have 2 really strong messages, one about being world-class in as a dentistry organization, and the other one which is really important to them, which is about putting the employees at the heart of clinical freedom and giving them the position where they can make decisions. So you can see how they've woven in their brand voice and the brand messaging into the text that they've written. And finally, if you produce a lot of content for your social and for your career site, and you blend in all of this great EVP and messaging, yet for some reason it doesn't get into your job ads, maybe because the people who are writing them are your hiring managers and they don't quite understand how you want to message, you will find that it really impacts the apply rate. So if there's a distance between those 2 things, you're likely to see a 2 to 4 times less applications, because people understand messaging and communication at a very subtle level, and will see the difference between the communication that you're doing in one of the places where they research you against the job ads that they're looking at. So I'd like to just talk about the gender biased in ads for a little while as well. I took that small sample from our main database of 10,000 UK job ads and ran it through one of our tools to pull out a few examples for you. So these sentences that I'm just about to show you are from real UK job ads and have been recently posted. So this is one here. I think most of them don't need a great deal of explanation. I think this is probably one of the worst I've seen in a while. Couldn't quite believe I saw that one. This is another one. All of these are quite obvious, and the corrections are quite obvious to them. And then finally, this one. This is actually pulled up by our tool's gender-coded word feature. So it's not as obvious what's going on here, but the actual phraseology that was flagged was dynamic leader. This is all based out of some academic research that was done in Canadian universities about how specific sets of words and different types of communication within a job ad will resonate more with women than men. And we find that when you put job ads through these, you'll end up with words or groups of words that are very masculine and groups of words that are considered to be very feminine. In actual fact, what you need to do when using the research from the gender-coded reports and academic studies is to remove the masculine bias and actually increase the feminine bias. That's because men will equally apply to a heavily masculine biased job ad and a heavily feminist biased job ad with hardly any variation. But what you will see is if you biased it over to the feminist end, that you'll see a rise in the number of women who will apply for the job ads. And you typically want to have roughly between 2 and 6% of words that come in within that group of words from that area. Okay, we found that when we put a number of ads through our system back through our filters, that 70% of these ads had some sort of male bias in it. Sometimes it was quite small, but other times it was quite major. Adzuna did something very similar over a year ago and found very similar results to what we did. And lastly, talking about language, we talked really about sort of the language is in the job description, language that's in the title, but there's also other bits of information that go along with a job advert. One of the most common things I get asked is it important to include a salary range? And yes, it is. There is research out there that says if you give someone an idea of what the salary is, you get a 30% uplift in applications. So it's time to sort of think about how we can bring all this together and try and build something inspiring, and how we can actually use all of this research in a way that's going to help you guys to produce something that's going to convert much better. And typically, some of the ads that we've been doing research on and building using our Nthuse system are seeing up to 50% uplift. And I'm going to show you a couple of them and talk about a couple of the campaigns that we've run and done research on. So the first one was a group of ads, of roughly about 80 that we did for Macmillan. We took a standard job ad, and in this case, we actually produced the new ads for Macmillan using the Nthuse system and injected them into a job board, which is something that we can do. And you can see in this case, it was the Guardian job board. And over 2 weeks, we ran these ads, and we used an A/B test. So half the people got the standard ad, which is, again, exactly the same text, which is the one on the left-hand side, and half got the enhanced ad. What we did with the enhanced ad was that we used some sort of authentic photography. So you can see here's a picture of one of the nurses from Macmillan, and started the ad by talking about what it's like to work at Macmillan rather than actually talking about the role itself. And that saw us gain a 50% increase in conversion rates across the whole 80-odd ads that were run over the 2-week period. This is another campaign where we ran A/B testing. This one was for the Bupa Dental Care Group. And I'm going to let this ad scroll through and just talk to you about some of the things that are in there. I think it's really fair to point out at the beginning of this that this was a particularly well-written ad to start with. So we didn't have to do anything about helping Bupa rewrite it. It was pretty well done. So all of the things that we did were to enhance the ad by adding rich content and also adding a lot of their messaging and their key messaging in. So here again, you can see a photograph at the top, which hopefully people will be emotionally able to connect with, a strong message from their EVP in the bar at the top. And then as we go through it, the actual role comes into play, followed by a series of imageries and messaging relating to the EVP of this particular employer brand, finalizing with a good call to action at the end. And this has probably given us one of the better increases that we saw here. We saw a 134% increase in conversion rate against the standard ad that we were running. So hopefully in showing you that I've proved that Nthuse can help you communicate the value of your value proposition effectively. And the next step is to show you how easily we can do that for you. So this is a little bit of a video of the actual application itself. And the first part of the application is a writing tool. So its aim is to help you with all of the issues we talked around language and stuff like that. So you can see it's got a number of different sections like correctness, clearness, inclusion, and structure. And it brings up a number of points which helps where you can help increase the quality of your actual text. Once you've got that text working, you're now looking at a section of the application that will build what is equivalent of a landing page. We call them candidate lead pages. And you can see it adding new sections. The text is brought into here, and we provide an interface where you can easily add your brand, including rich media and things like testimonials, where you can bring out that message and help people relate to your brand more clearly. And here you can see the ad once it's been finished. And of course, it works perfectly both from a full desktop size and also in mobile, which is really important these days. And then finally, we build into it tracking mechanisms so that if and when you then go out and use different methodologies to reach different audiences, we can track which of those audiences audience reach methodologies you were using and what was the most effective in terms of conversion. From a technical perspective, and actually from the application in totality, we tried to make it as open as possible. We've designed it as a toolkit so that there's a number of different things in there that'll help you convert sort of clicks into candidates. We've built ATS integration in where we can, so we've already got 6 different ATSs where we can pull jobs into the system without you actually going and having copy and paste them. Obviously, you can still do that. You can also pull individual jobs across from websites where possible. We've built in integration to Zapier. This is a really common tool used by marketeers. It allows you to integrate things like MailChimp and lots of other things, other applications without actually doing any coding at all. So that's already built in. You can deploy the ads that I was just talking about to 46 different job boards now that have signed up, and they allow you to put these types of ads into their job board. So we've got that type of distribution of those very rich ads directly into their job boards. And finally, we're building in social media posting and actually banner advertising posting as well. So you can help use this type of campaigning in those areas. So what does it provide you? Well, hopefully we'll provide you with tools to inspire the right candidates across multiple channels. So you can build standalone candidate lead pages, custom social campaigns, display advertising, and branded adverts that can go into job boards. And that's it. I think it's important for me to say that although we've got Nthuse out at the moment, the version that I've been showing and talking to you about today and all the research is for our up and coming beta. So we're hoping to release this product on the 18th of November. And you can sign up for the beta at the moment. And there's the little URL, nthuse.com/grow. If you're interested in some of the stuff that I've talked about, obviously I'm on LinkedIn as well. So connect with me. I'll be more than happy to connect with people. So I think at this stage, I'll just collapse the slides and hopefully we've got some questions to answer.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ben. That was really insightful. And I love all the stats that you've got. You've got so much data to hand, which is brilliant as well. So thank you very much for sharing. I think a lot of the everyone online was probably intrigued with everything that you were saying. So we've only got one question to start with. But anyone that's online, do feel free to type your questions in. You can post them to Glenn now. So I touched on this briefly, Glenn, with the job boards. What job boards are allowing you to post those enhanced job ads? Graham mentioned that some of the big players don't allow that kind of feature. So who are you're probably working with able to do that?
Okay. So at the moment, as I said, there's 46 of them. They are listed on our site. They tend to be quite niche job boards at the moment, although there are some larger players in there. So to give you an example, Mumsnet is one that's using our technology quite a lot, and it's really nice to see they've done some good campaigns around bringing people back into the workplace. At the moment, it's only job boards that are using Magex's technology, but we are talking to some others as well. So hopefully in the future, we might be able to get some of the other larger players to accept our job format, and that conversation's ongoing.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, sorry, I think it just went a little bit offline there, but we're back on. So there's a few questions around the sort of gender biases. Do you integrate with Textio? Is that something that you guys integrate with?
So no, we don't. So in terms of what you're actually seeing in that tool, it works on multiple different tiers. We're actually using machine learning to do a lot of the understanding of the language. So you could build a very simple tool that just looked for individual words and offered swap outs and stuff like that. But we're actually trying to understand the language at a much more in-depth level. So we try and understand the grammar of sentences and the structure of a job ad. And the language that's used in job ads is really specific. So we've had to build tools to do that. Luckily, we've got large amounts of data to help us do that. So we're analysing all of that data. In terms of the gender things, we've actually got 3 tiers of work that's going on there. We do things like look for job titles like chairman and things like that, and offer up exchanges for that. We also look for terminology, like some of the things that you saw in that sentence. So things like male-dominated or manpower or other things would be brought up, and some really quite subtle ones as well, like maternity versus parental and stuff like that would be offered up. It's up to you whether you choose to swap those out. And then finally, we're taking the work that was done in the gender-coded research, academic research, and we brought that in. And at the moment, we're in the throes of validating all of that and using the data that we've got in our systems to try and offer up better ways of writing ads that are much more inclusive. We're basically looking at how people apply for jobs and what the balances are for different types of jobs to allow us to look at how the language in that differs, and then we can try and offer that up. So to a degree, we are doing some of the stuff that Textio does already, but not all of it. So it wouldn't be something that we would integrate with, because we're always covering parts of what they're doing.
Okay, brilliant. And do you, considering that so many job ads have sort of masculine words, do you have a kind of list or an idea of what kind of feminine words people use instead? Is that something that you've got listed, or is that what the tool does and just doesn't?
Yes, so there are lists, but it's really quite interesting in that you can't usually swap the lists words over directly. So if I talk in general about how it works, the initial psychology work that was done, I think it was Waterloo University in Canada who did it, basically looked at the sense of belonging, and that's where a lot of this comes from. So a lot of the words around belonging are also around collaboration, so mentoring, working in teams, things like that. That then forms the bulk of the words and phraseologies around what people will work for a more inclusive group of people. And in this case, it's not just women. We'll actually work for other groups as well. Words around individual performance and actioning of things tend to work really well for men, but then don't work so well for other groups. So what you end up trying to do is actually move the language itself away from specific performance related stuff to talking about collaboration. And most jobs have both of these things in it. It's just that some of the text don't actually bring it out. Some just bring out the performance related stuff and don't talk about what it's like to work in a team or who you'll be working with. And just by changing that balance a little bit, you'll definitely improve the sort of broad sort of inclusion and diversity of the applicants that are coming through. So it's not just as simple as switching out words. There's a lot more to it than that. We're going to try and encourage people to change the language generally.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of ATS systems that you integrate with, I think you mentioned that you currently have a few on board. Who is it that does those ATS integrations currently?
Okay, I was looking to the side because I'm hoping Jenny's who's with me is going to say. So definitely Workable's one of them. It'll just be a second pulling that list up. I can't remember off the top of my head, if I'm absolutely honest. Okay.
Looking to increase as well.
Workable, Lever, JobVite, Smart Recruit, Greenhouse. We're also looking at Logic Melon at the moment as well. But there'll be a few more as we add them.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of, you've obviously spoken a lot about job advertising and making sure that recruitment marketing works for that. Do you have a top tip for improving recruitment marketing in general outside of job advertising? Is there anything that you've seen that works quite well, or you've seen clients that do particularly well?
Yes, I mean, so today we've talked about just, I suppose, one element of a marketing campaign, and it is around this particular area, and I've gone into real depth on it. But yes, there's a much broader subject in itself. I mean, the bringing out of the EVP messages is really important. So, for example, our company, we had some research done recently, and one of the messages about working here is that we have large amounts of data, and for the technical teams, the fact that we're still 100 odd so people means that we're quite small. So it's a nice place to work in terms of the small, but you get to use the tools that people like Google use. So that's our core message. Bringing those types of messages through any other channel like social media and any other way that you can bring out that core messaging, and then tying it back in again is really important. So I suppose what I'm saying is to a broad approach and then bring it narrowly to a point where you will be concentrating on conversion, which is what we've talked about today.
Sorry, my internet.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just try and answer some of the questions that are left. Seems though we've lost a bit of the connection that are there. So one of the questions at the top there is, do we place solutions like Broadbean? So Broadbean's a multi-poster.
Sorry, everyone.
So Broadbean's a multi-poster. Basically allows you to post text adverts from one system to another. Not really. Yes, our system does post ads into job boards, but the idea is to push really rich ads in, which includes your employer brand and elements of your EVP in there. So types of systems like Broadbean just tend to deal with text, to be honest. So no, we're not similar to that, and the aim of it is different. The aim is to improve conversion rather than just to distribute.
I personally, I can't hear anything. My internet seems to have gone wrong. So Glenn, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you're able to carry on with the questions that you can see going through, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I'm just looking for some more questions. Big players. Adverts. I think we've answered quite a few of the ones that are there at the moment. They're all sort of around the areas of integration. I suppose maybe I could just talk about the integration in general. I think one of the things that we've seen from marketing tools, and if we are going to learn from that area, is that they tend to use an approach like what's referred to as a stack, so a series of small solutions, so things that just deal with one particular thing and then bring them all together. And you know, this approach is what we've really taken on board. But to do that, you've got to allow for really good integration, and that's what we're going to try and do. So the Zapier thing allows you to exchange data really easily between different systems. We're also going to provide APIs for this. We've got feeds and really simple APIs on it. The idea is not to become some place where the data is held in, but for us to play and work well with as many of the other tools that are out there at the moment. Okay. Yeah. I think probably at this stage we're coming to the end of the hour, and we've answered most of the questions. It may be time to wrap up, and we've got a few technical issues going on as well. But can I say to everybody, thank you for your time. I hope you've got something out of today. Please sign up for the beta. We'll try and send you information about what we're doing. We're also going to be putting out quite a lot of research over the next few months based on some of the topics that you heard about today. So if you're interested in that, also sign up for us, and we should be putting out quite a lot of material over the next few months. And yeah, thank you very much.